Hello, this is Malorian. This is the Orc Tactical Team, and what this video here is going to be touching on is actually something that came off as a comment from the last live video I did, where they're saying, hey Malorian, could you do some more videos for us new players? And so I think one of the best ways to start there is do a video that talks about the mistakes that new players tend to make. Just, it's not really picking on you, like, oh, these are the stupid things that new guys do. These are just some of the pitfalls that they fall into that kind of pull them away from being as competitive as they can, or even enjoying themselves as much as they can. So I think the very first thing to jump in here, that's the first one we're going to be touching on, is just the fact of getting discouraged when you lose. And that's where, you have one person that comes in, plays a game, gets decimated, and says, you know what, this army is garbage, or even this game is garbage, and drops the whole thing. One of the first things you have to realize whenever you enter in a hobby, and maybe you're a 40K person coming into fantasy, maybe you're brand new to fantasy, but either way, you have to realize that whenever you start a new strategic game like this, that there's going to be a learning curve, and that there's going to be people that are going to be beating you in the beginning. Now, with this, of course, you want to try and find the right tutor. You want to find someone that isn't just going to be smashing your face if that's not your learning style. And that's the thing, too, is also look at yourself and decide what type of learning style you have. I know back when I was trying to teach some people how to play chess, what I do is just keep on doing a three-move checkmate, right? And I just do it until you learned and you stopped it. Then I'd start doing a next type of trick, and I keep on doing that until you learned how to stop it. And some people will try and teaching you in fantasy like that, where they're just going to pound you in the face until you learn how to redirect over and over again, and then eventually you'll catch on. The problem is that if you're the person that says that, man, he's not explaining anything, I'm just getting my butt kicked, this sucks. Well, if you're like that, try and find somebody else then that takes the time and say, okay, I'm moving this unit here, these are your options, and this is the reason why I did this. So make sure you find the right tutor. But even then, even if you're going into a game store and you do lose to somebody, just realize that that's part of the game, and instead of focusing on the fact that you lost and got destroyed, focus on what happened in the game and what you could have done differently. And I think that really moves on to our second point here, where when you're a new player, I think it's very important to try and keep track of your games and what happened. I'm not talking about, oh, you need to have a little tally, like, okay, now I'm 0-1, now I'm 0-2, oh, look, I won a game. It's not like that. Make sure that whether you're going to be taking pictures or taking notes or something like that, make sure to actually go back and reassess your games. That's something I got a real massive benefit from when I started doing these videos here on Orc. When I was writing them on Warseer, and then when I did them here on YouTube. And that's the fact that when you're actually going and either writing up your battle report or talking about it, you realize, like, man, I kind of made a mistake. Looking at this here, I could have done this different. And it's really good to have that real self look at yourself to try and realize what you did and what were the other options you had. And at the same time, looking at your opponent and say, okay, well, what did he do? Okay, this is his options and he chose to do this. Why did he do this? And is that something I should be doing? And that way you're going to be improving your game through doing this. And as well, as long as you're doing this in a public place, again, either typing it up and putting it on a place like Warseer or putting it up on YouTube, the very nice thing you're going to be getting from this is feedback. And again, you're going to be getting some negative feedback, like, oh man, you're so dumb, and oh, look at this non-painted models and stuff. But the good news is that you're also going to have people saying, like, oh, well, at this point here, you could have actually reformed to go wider. Oh, well, actually here, if you would have fled, you've been fine. Or maybe you should have actually gone for this flank here if you'd just been a little bit more to the side. So that's a very big point as well. Because even though, like I said, you're going to be looking at yourself, you're just a new player. You're going to be missing things. There's going to be even rules you might mess up. And then doing this with other people, they're going to catch on to these things and make you a better player. Now, with this, the next point you really have to keep in mind is not to jump to internet lists. And the reason for this is that people that are playing very competitively will have very strong lists. And as a new player, it's very tempting just to say, like, okay, what's the winning tournament list right now? All right, boom, that's my list. And the reason why that might not be a good choice is that some of these armies aren't just point and click, of course, right? They're not just, hey, I just take these big, huge hordes of ogres and move them up, and there you go, right? Just kill things. Well, some of these things take finesse, where it's all about baiting and all about, doing these double flees and all that stuff and making sure that these two units work in combination. And if you just grab this army and kind of like do your own thing and try and learn along the way, it's not really going to work. And the other thing too here is that these different lists have different styles. And you have to realize that going into this game, you do have your own gamer style. You might think that, oh no, I'm just some dude coming into the game. No, no, no. You have a personality. You have a style. I know for myself, I thought that I'm a really defensive person. However, a lot of times in my games, I just love to be all out offensive and going after people. So you really have to see how you're going to be going. Like maybe you're a person that likes to just hold back and shoot. Maybe you're a person that likes to have the whole combined forces. Maybe you like to have all calf. Maybe you like to really focus on magic. And really, only way you're going to figure this out is by making your own list. Looking through, taking what you think would be good, playing it out, and adjusting your own list. Because as you're doing that, you're also helping yourself learn. Because you're not just making the blind choice of grab a list and use it. You built this list for a reason. You have an idea in your head how this list is actually going to be operating on the table. And so when it doesn't operate and do what you think it's going to do, then you say, okay, well, this didn't do what I thought it was to do. Maybe I should take this unit instead. Or maybe I should have used it this different way. So that's a very big thing you need to do. The next part of this as well is the whole army choice as well. A big problem I see with some people going into playing Warhammer is the first thing they'll do is, okay, well, what's the best armies? Oh, okay, it's this. All right, I'm going to play that army then. Or what army is about to be released? Okay, well, that one's about to be released, then I won't play it until it actually comes out. And this is a big mistake again because, of course, that's just going to lead to the last point where you're taking this best army because there's some super list and then you're just going to be using that super list and then again it's not really helping you develop. What you should be doing is just honestly looking at all the different armies, see which one looks cool and going with them. I know that sounds really stupid, but it actually is the way you need to go. A good example from my own experience is that when I was starting off in 40K, I looked through and I thought, okay, well, I think, like I said, I want something that's going to be really tough and hard to kill. Oh, okay, I'm going to go with Nurgle. Yeah, that's awesome. I bought a whole bunch of Nurgle. It converted up a whole bunch of different Nurgle rhinos and stuff. And it wasn't until after I realized that I don't like the look of these guys. Everybody's fat and all like their guts falling out and they're all just, there's no personality in them, like they're not in any crazy poses. They're all just always boring like little dead zombies. And I didn't even really like the army. And so I just had to sell them and move on to something else. So that's very important because again, one of the objectives of getting you into Warhammer isn't to make you a winning player, it's to make you enjoy the game. And if you're playing something you don't really like the look of, you're not going to want to paint it, you're not going to want to really play with it, and you're going to lose interest. So, especially now this is something where I could have said before in 7th edition, and it would have been kind of like iffy depending what it is. Definitely now, a lot of the armies are very balanced. Sure, there's going to be ones that overall are stronger books than others, but as kind of like the example I always say, whereas in 7th you could have said like, okay, there's power levels and there's something like this, right? Like, man, demons are so much better than ogres. Now you can say that some armies are better than others, but they're still pretty damn close, right? I mean, some of the ones that they say are bad are ones like Wood Elves or Bretonnians or Beastmen. And you can still make very good army lists for all of those. So no matter which one you take, just know that you can build very good lists and just make sure go with the ones that you like, start going through the units that you think you like the look of, and then just going from there. Throw them all together, make a list, and off you go. Now, the next part here I want to talk about is when you're making your first lists. And like I said, just grabbing units and throwing them all together. Now, one of the things you probably don't want to do is just running out and just buying tons of models, unless you can find a pretty awesome deal. If you're on eBay or Kijiji or whatever, and you find some guy that's leaving the hobby and you're getting just like a box full of models, that's awesome. Go for that stuff. Grab it as fast as you can. However, if you're going to be investing lots of money, I would hold off on it and maybe even just try and do a little bit of proxies. Of course, the game is a lot more fun when you're not doing proxies and when things are painted and blah, blah, blah. But when you're learning and you're about to dump in, $500 onto a new army, it better be stuff that you're actually going to enjoy. Now, Of course, there's a grace period on this. I'm not saying that you can run proxies for 3 years. I'm talking about you can run proxies for a type of unit for, say, like 1 to 3 games, and then if you like the unit, you should probably go buy it because it's going to be pissing your friends off. So, for your first couple of games, whatever units you think are cool, throw them together and off you go. And at the same time, as you're a new player, try and find these deals. I mean, old starter sets. It might not be the current set. I mean, right now, as I'm talking with this one, it's High Elves versus Skaven. Well, maybe you're getting to Orcs and Goblins. Well, there was an Orcs and Goblins one before that was full of Night Goblins and had a troll in it. It was awesome. And there's one even before that that had a whole bunch of Orc archers and dual-handed guys and a chariot and a boss and a boar. And I mean, you find these old things, put them together for a very little cost, and you have a good sizable army right away. So if you can find stuff like that, that's awesome. I'm not trying to steal stuff away from GW, but let's face it, as a new player, this is a very inexpensive way to get into the game. Now that we're past that part, where you got the right tutor, you've made your kind of first list, and you're going into your first game. The next type of mistake that a lot of new players make is not really having a plan before they start the game. They grab their models, they kind of throw them down, and off you go. And there's no plan of what you're going to be doing whatsoever. Really, what you should be trying to do and forcing yourself to do when you're making your list is, of course, whenever you're taking a unit, there should be a reason why you're trying to take that unit, right? I'm not grabbing something because, like, hey, look, this chariot would be cool, let's throw it in there. Well, a chariot doesn't really operate on itself. A chariot should be with a block, something to take away steadfast, unless it's on the flanks and trying to deal with, throwaway units and flank units and stuff. But again, you should be having a plan for these units, because really the big thing that some people, especially coming from 40K or some other skirmish games, don't realize about fantasy is the whole block style of movement. If you set up your blocks in a row across the battlefield and all of a sudden you realize that you're in bad matchups, well, that's just too bad for you, because it's going to take you a good 3 turns to realign those, and by that time you're getting charged. So you really have to make sure that as you're playing down your blocks, you have an idea. And probably most people don't even realize that the deployment phase is actually a very big part of the game, and realizing that you want to place down your unimportant units first and then be going up from there. If you're looking at the other side and they have something that's a perfect counter to yours, you want to be playing that game and trying to draw out that unit so that you can be placing yours. And then the same thing going the other way. If you want to make sure that your knights are going to be paired off against his shooting units, okay, well, wait until those units are placed down, bam, now I know my knights need to go there. Right? So you really have to remember that part as well. The next thing to remember as a new player that they typically forget is just the whole fact of how charges work and how redirects work, and the whole fact that once I do this, there's going to be a new situation. I see it so many times with new players where, okay, well, I'm going to go and charge this, and then they don't realize that if on the chances you fail that charge, or if I flee or something, that your block is going to be farther up, and all of a sudden they can be seeing flank charges. Again, that's probably a big thing that comes from people that go and do other skirmish games where, a flank charge, what does that matter? I mean, you got some orcs that charge the flank of my space marines? That doesn't mean anything. Well, in this game it means a whole heck of a lot. And the whole importance of the movement phase and realizing your angles and as you move, how that actually affects the game is so critical to Warhammer Fantasy. So as a new player, you should be, as you be moving up your guys, I mean, a lot of times you see that in chess, right? You take your piece, you put it where you think you want it to go, and you think, okay, if I'm here, who can actually take me out? Okay, well, maybe I should be moving somewhere else instead. And really be thinking of that when you move your units. If I go like this, which units of mine will be able to support me? If he charges me, what do I do? What would be my counter to that? And you have to really get yourself in that mindset. Again, if you're a person with a chess background, that might be automatic, but if you're somebody that's coming back from some other game, it might not be. So that's something you really have to remember. Now, probably the next biggest mistake that I see people make when they're already in the game is the whole thing of the way that they're actually going to be deploying and protecting other parts of their army. Now, of course, like I said, you want to be getting the matchups, you want to be careful when you're moving things up, but at the same time, you also have to be remembering about how you need to be protecting your various key models. And the ones where I'm talking about here are things like anything that's like a war machine that's really going to be doing its stuff and it can't defend itself. You might have supporting units, sort of like a Hurricanum or something, and then there's your key characters. I mean, so many times I see it that people will be playing as a new player, and there's their level 4 mage standing in their combat block at the very front, and so all you do is go up, engage, and kill him, and ultimately they lose all their magic. Maybe they're the general, and then that's it. So you have to really remember as a new player that you need to protect these key pieces, whether you're going to be spending points to be getting armor or ward saves or building a bunker or something like that. You have to realize that you're not just running up and attacking, you're getting attacked back too. So you have to be kind of thinking about this. Now, that kind of leads into the next big mistake that some new players make, and that's going kind of character crazy. Of course, I mean, there's all things nice like having a bunch of your swordsmen and knights and stuff like this, but some new players get into the game really like getting into it for the fluff and the idea of the character. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we can start seeing them do is like, well, I got this cool guy who's my lord, and I don't want to see him die, so I'm going to spend as many points as I can to make him so he's basically invincible and super killy and super awesome. And you know what? He has his buddy, the BSB, and he's going to be set up like this. You know what? Let's add another hero with him. And he's going to be cool like this. And this unit over here, he'll have a hero. And in the end, what you start seeing is that they spend so many points on heroes and gear to protect those heroes and enhance them that they don't have points for the rest of their army. I'm going to be playing a game against the guy tomorrow where it's one of his first games, and I just know that he's going to probably have at 1700 points 3 to 5 characters and taking up a lot of his units, whereas for me, I'm just going to take one thing in my dwarf army. That's going to be it, and everything else is going to be a whole bunch of different units. And now this leads into something else too. If you go character heavy, your tactical opportunities are smaller. There's very little that they can do. If you go and take a lot of different blocks, there's a lot more things you can be doing with the way that different units go and support each other. Plus, of course, you're getting to go and test out more units at the same time. So with that, I really highly suggest as a new player that you go very light on characters and take as many different units as possible. I mean, like I said, you're probably going to really love your characters. You might start making a backstory for them or something, but you have to realize that in this game, things die. And that's just the way it is. And that the only way you're going to be learning is not by trying to keep this one guy alive, but it's by actually playing the game and letting things happen. So that's pretty much that part there. The only last thing I want to touch about is people not focusing on the end game. And I'd say this is also now the final last big mistake that I see new players make. Now, what that means is that of course, I mean, some things are pretty standard, right? If you're playing just a regular pitch battle, I'm fighting you, you're fighting me, kill, 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 there you go. But then, of course, you have all the things with the scenarios, right? If you're playing something like Watchtower or Blood and Glory and something like that, you really have to be focused on the actual scenario, otherwise you can just lose, right? The other person puts something into the tower, you think, hey, I'm just going to charge these guys, and all of a sudden the game's over, they hold the Watchtower, and you lose. Or they don't realize that you're just as a new player, you're one banner away from losing. And so when your knights over here are being charged, you don't realize that you're one banner away from losing. And so you can't risk this being lost anymore. So they need to flee or stay away. I mean, it's always so unfortunate when you're playing something like Blood and Glory, and it's like, well, I killed this unit and I win. And they're like, what, really? The game's over? It's like, yeah, it is. Do you want to play again? So you really have to focus on that. And as well, just the whole thing about how this is a game, if it's not for those, for victory points, and that a lot of times it's not so much about getting the most out of any one unit, it's about getting more victory points than your opponent. with that, so many times I see people think like, okay, well, what did this unit do? Well, I better charge it in so they can actually kill something. And then, of course, it's just kind of like throwing them away. They die, and all you do is lose more victory points. It's the whole type of thing where back in the days when Temple Guard weren't immune to Psych, I used to always move them up and then flee the charge because people will just assume that I'm going to go up there and fight with the Temple Guard. They don't realize that all these units, you can be using them in different ways to be gaining victory points, and that at the end of the game, that's what it's all about. So anyway, that's kind of the real main pitfalls I see new players making, all the way from, as I said, picking their army to the very beginning, to the way they deploy, to the way that they actually plan to finish the game at the end. So that's pretty much it. I have a few more other ideas I'm going to be touching on for just kind of going over things for new players, and as well touching about some more complicated tactics for, of course, experienced players as well. So there you have it. Thanks for watching. Bye.